Hi, Mike. Sorry.
Nice.
Mute. I was on mute. I was talking to mute.
No problem. How you been?
Good. Yourself?
Good.
Hi,
So,
Chip.
Hi, April. How are you?
Good, good.
Andrew and Anna, Chip was one of our former speakers. Did a great job with Tom Horn on white privilege in December. So always great to see him.
Nice meeting you all.
Nice meeting you. What? Wait a minute, let me put my mute on. I cannot.
It always starts off as a successful session when your Google Meet tells you there's a lot of people here. So how you best manage it. So we'll give people another minute, then we'll jump in. Got a nice sized crowd already, which is great. All right, but let's get started. I'm certain we'll have a lot of other people join. So welcome. I'm thrilled that you're here. We have many new guests who have joined this speaker series event this month. I'm Mike DiCandido. I'm the co-founder and the chair of Common Bonds, along with April Adams, and we're really, really pleased to have you here for this month's Zoe Rogers speaker series event on racism and education. Just a couple of things. If you can keep your lines on mute, that would be great. You certainly can keep your video on if you'd like, or turn your video off. You will see on the right-hand side, upper right-hand side, there is a box that is a chat box. That's the avenue where you can go ahead and ask questions that you may have during the session. We try to get to all the questions that are asked. You can see that a couple of people have commented in the chat box already. So if you want to launch that and any questions you have, certainly go ahead and put them in there, and we'll get to them through the session. A couple of quick promotion notes, and then I'll introduce our speakers and our facilitator. For those of you who are not familiar with Common Bonds, we started the organization in September, whose mission is to educate people around racism and bias against African Americans. You can follow us on any social media site at Common Bonds, as well as at www.commonbonds.org. And April at the end will tell you about some of the great future sessions that we have coming up. So let's jump in. So we're thrilled to have two amazing participants, panelists tonight, joining us to discuss this really important topic on racism and education. So I'd like to welcome both of them, who are Andrew Bell Sr. and Anna Shurak. Andrew Bell Sr. began his teaching career in Camden in September 1988 and remained in that district for 22 years. He has 10 years of classroom experience and then moved to administration for the last 12 years of his time at Camden. He's held the roles of vice principal, chief school support officer, chief academic officer, and chief strategy officer. And he brings a wealth of experience and expertise in his current role as the superintendent of the Woodbury City Public Schools in Woodbury, New Jersey. As mentioned, he has a plethora of experience as a teacher, K-8 principal, and chief academic officer. He's a genuine leader who has led major change with unprecedented results. He's a graduate of Morgan State University and holds advanced degrees from Wilmington State University and the Relay School of Education. He is married and has 2 children. And I think he has 2 children. I'm sorry. He's married Zoe and Andrew Jr. and his wife, Ayana, as well. And they enjoy fishing and following the beloved Philadelphia 76ers. So, Andrew, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
With Andrew, we have Anna Shurak joining us. Anna serves as the executive director of Teach for America in Philadelphia. Teach for America, if you're not familiar with the great organization, it recruits, trains, and supports a diverse network of teachers and leaders dedicated to expanding access and opportunities for children. Teach for America serves over 1,600 or has 1,600 members in Philadelphia, and 10% of the city's principals are Teach for America alums, serving 55,000 students in the Philadelphia area. Anna also worked in the Camden School District as Chief School Support Officer of High School for Camden City Schools. And in this role, she supported, managed, and developed high school principals, leadership teams, and systems in order to best serve students and ensure preparedness for college and careers. She had some great successes in Camden. School achievement doubled in math and reading, graduation rates improved by nearly 20%, and accompanied substantial growth in college acceptance and matriculation. She served many roles in her career as well, brings a plethora of experience, teacher, instructional coach, assistant principal, and district official in Philadelphia and Camden, is a multiple education award winner, the Young Women's Leadership Network Blue Ribbon Teaching Award for Excellence in All Girls Education, and the Christian R. and Mary F. Lindback Distinguished High School Education Award as well. She is a Teach for America alum. She is a graduate of Indiana University and has a master's degree from St. Joseph's University. She loves spending time with her 2 daughters and her husband. And personally, I serve on the board, the regional board of Teach for America, and Anna's leadership has really transformed Teach for America and benefited the Philadelphia School District directly and immensely along with their team. So Anna, thank you for joining us. Thanks for all your work with Teach for America, and we really look forward to getting your insights tonight.
Thanks so much, Mike. Happy to be here with everyone.
Yep, thank you. And finally, I'm really excited to introduce our facilitator tonight, who is Maura McKenna. Maura McKenna is a graduate of Gwen and Mercy Academy High School in Lower Gwinnett, Pennsylvania. She is a graduate of LaSalle University in Philadelphia. She has a degree in early elementary and special education and a minor in American Studies. She was very, very active at LaSalle as part of their Immersion and Volunteer Experience program, where she led a service and immersion experience to DeKalb County, Georgia. She was a LaSalle ambassador, a member of the National Association of Collegiate Scholars. She was a 4-year varsity athlete on the women's rowing team. And she currently teaches 6th grade at Olney Elementary School in the Philadelphia School District. It's her 2nd year teaching in the district. She has a master's degree from St. Joseph's University. And a little personal story about Maura and her commitment to her students. Last year, she taught at Mead, 6th and 7th grade in North Philly. And at the time the coronavirus hit, she was well aware that many of her students were underprivileged and didn't have the appropriate supplies to continue to do online learning. So she quickly started a fund drive to gather supplies, and then she delivered those supplies personally to all of her students. There are 53 of them in total. So she spent the day going around Philly, and I think pleasantly surprised many of them from the reactions that we saw. So we're really, really pleased to have a school teacher being able to facilitate our session. Maura is also a board member for Common Bonds. She's actually a board officer. She's our board secretary. So Maura, welcome and thank you for facilitating tonight. And I'm going to hand it over to you to start our evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mike, for that intro. I am so excited to be here and talking with Anna and Andrew. I know that their positions in this education system are going to offer us such good insight about, institutional racism. I've so enjoyed talking with Common Bonds about interpersonal racism and systemic racism. But today really means a lot to me just because, being a teacher, I know that this education system is one of the first times our Black, our Brown, our Latinx students come face to face with an institution that just was not designed with them in mind. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from Andrew and Anna about maybe what they see as holding their unique positions in education. So let's get started with Andrew and Anna. If you guys could tell us a little bit more about your background in the education system as a student, and then also, did these experiences really impact your decision to become leaders in education? So I guess maybe Andrew, you can begin, and then Anna can follow.
Yeah, so I'll start. So my experience as a student was pretty unique. As a young kid, I'm one of 5. And my father, at a certain age, decided that we were living in Philadelphia. We were living in Germantown area. And I have a twin brother and have a brother who's about a year and 11 months older than I am. And my dad, he told us as we got older that his goal was he was going to move us to a different area because of education. And so most of my schooling, I was in predominantly white schools in the suburbs of New Jersey. And it really started to, I really became aware of what that meant when I got to high school. And we were the very first few Black students who were kind of bussed into a certain high school that was out of our neighborhood. And I learned some experiences about racism and race and the effects of my skin color very early on in kind of 8th and 9th grade. And then, high school, it was okay. I got through, I was an athlete. I didn't have a whole lot of problems, but racism was there. It was prevalent. And, I graduated as the last graduating class of the 80s, 89. So, there were a lot of systems and ideologies that were happening in high school that we weren't tackling back then when it came to race. After high school, I did a couple of quick stints at some small colleges as a basketball player, community college, and then I went to a engineering college down in Laurel, Maryland called Capital College, and I did well there. I had a really good basketball season there, but it was a really boring campus. And during my off time, I used to hang at Howard University and at Bowie State University, which were HBCUs. Now, during my college, my high school experience, my guidance counselor never talked to me about college. I never had any idea about what a historically Black college or university was coming from. Now, I had an idea, but nobody in my school would ever talked about it, about historically Black colleges and universities. I had a graduating class of 400 and something students, and we had 14 students of color in my graduating class. We had no Latinx folks in my graduating class in high school. So after my stint at Capital College, I went to Morgan State University, which is historically Black college and university. And at that time, I was really intrigued to know what the experience was like to go to school with students and people that looked like me. I had never experienced that before. And my first day was just, it was really, I'll never forget, I walked on campus and I just saw all these beautiful Black people learning at college, and I was just dumbfounded. And then when I really woke up and had an awakening was one of my very first classes was the Black diaspora. And my professor was just talking about all of these things that involve the diaspora of people of color. And I ignorantly asked him after the first class, like, is this true? I had never heard of anything he had been talking about. the Moors and, being from Egyptian descent and, Africans and how we, he didn't, I thought I was going into a class to hear about slavery. I didn't hear anything about slavery. I heard about kings and queens and things that I never even, heard about in high school. And it really made me to really start to think what is going on and what has happened during my whole formative, years in K to 12. I learned nothing about myself. So at Morgan, how I got into education was I was actually a graphic design major. And I was staying one summer, and the last job available was to work in community service as work study. So, we didn't have a lot of money growing up. So I was eligible for work study. So I took a work study job in the Department of Community Service with a Dr. Deanna V. Ahimi. And she said to us, another friend of mine from Philadelphia, Jerry O'Barry, she said, I have a grant and I want to run a mentoring program. Do you guys know anything about mentoring kids? And both of us were like, no, but we need a job. So we figured it out. Another young lady from New York, Helen Stewart, we came up with this program called Kawumba, which was a mentoring program. During my second week, we had Dr. Marvin Sampson at Morgan State University was one of our speakers. And after a session, he pulled me to the side and asked me what my major was. And I told him I was a graphic design major. So he said, okay, so how are you going to make money when you graduate? And I kind of looked at him and said, I don't know. I mean, I'm just a graphic design major. He said to me, I've watched you with these kids for 2 weeks now. You're an educator. And I was like, I don't know, what are you talking about, man? And he said he had done no homework. He had already pulled my transcript. And he said, come see me in my office. I went to his office and he said, if you take 2 summer school classes this year, you could be still on track to graduate with your class. And you should get an education. And you can still paint, he kind of went, you can paint pictures and make money in your spare time, but you should be an educator. And, I didn't know anything back then. And so I said, okay. And then the last thing he told me was kind of funny. He said, but tomorrow, in order to get into this school of education, you have to take a test. And I was like, a test tomorrow? And it was actually the praxis test. I had no idea about any of this stuff. He said, yes, tomorrow morning at 7:30, be here, bring some pencils and be on time. Don't go out partying tonight. And I said, okay. And the next day I went, I took my praxis test. I passed. I got into the School of Education. I changed my major from graphic design to art education. And that was my segue into education. And so I was in Baltimore City, and during my student teaching, before I got finished student teaching, I got offered a full-time job in Baltimore City. And of course I took it right away. And that's how I got into education. But I don't want, I always tell people, I didn't know what I was doing, and I wasn't convinced that I was a career educator. I always wanted to work in sports and entertainment, but I was also working in Foot Locker, and they told me how much money I was going to make teaching. And I said, oh, okay, well, I can probably do this for a couple of years right out of college and just have some fun. And here we are 25 years later, I'm a superintendent. So, small beginnings, but that's my story, kind of in a nutshell about education. There's a lot more details in there, but we want to get to all the good stuff later on.
Thank you for sharing that story. That's incredible. Thank you.
Welcome.
And how about you, Anna?
Yes. So thanks so much. Thanks, Andrew, for kicking us off. So my personal experiences in the education system, I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, which is a liberal college town. And my high school experience was pretty traditional. But from a very young age, I very firmly believed in the ability and opportunity for everyone to have an equal chance. And I actually think this stemmed from being singled out as a first grader for being Jewish by my teacher, and me vehemently believing that I was no different than anyone else, and seeing the impact of other students and what it meant to make sure that everyone's, as a student, had their voice heard. And so from that time, I always would stand up for other folks in school. I was very involved with student government, and went on to Indiana University and studied political science and policy studies. And I joined Teach for America in 2004. and came to Philadelphia. And I'm going to be honest, when I read this question earlier, Maura, when it says my personal experiences with the education system, when I really think about what changed me and led me to pursue a career in education, it was my experience of meeting Mrs. Linda Clyde Wayman as my first principal and mentor at Fitzsimons High School in North Philadelphia. And coming from Wisconsin, I'm gonna be honest that I did not even ever realize as a white girl from the Midwest that there could be an entire school of African-American students that were there not by choice. And it was through Ms. Wayman's leadership then and now that I really realized what it is to not only teach, but to lead, and what the possibility is for students when you actually put them at the center and hold ourselves accountable as adults to make a difference. And so similar to Andrew, Ms. Wayman said to me, I think you should stay with this education thing and continue to learn more. And I looked at her as my principal and said, I would never want your job, so I'm not sure why I would do that. But lo and behold, I always take advice from a teacher, and she is one of my best. And so have continued on that path and remained committed to being in schools and making a difference in our city here.
It's incredible. I'm so excited to jump into these just based off those responses. So I think something that really strikes me is that in America, I think we have this idea of education being this great equalizer, that it's something that if you just put your head down, you work hard, you can achieve the American dream. And I guess I want to hear your perspective. Do you believe that every child can attain that with our education system? Do you think that that's realistic for all students, or are there barriers that our students are facing that we might not even, be aware of, that maybe are hindering their opportunity of accessing this equalizing effect of education? Anna, you can start off.
You want me to jump in? Okay. So I'm going to be very clear. I absolutely think that every single student can achieve whatever they put their mind to. But systemic racism in this country holds our students who identify as Black, Brown, Indigenous, as people of color, do not have the same opportunity. And white folks, myself as one of those people, have a hard time breaking away from this idea that if you just work hard enough, you can make it, because we have never actually experienced the level of racism that our fellow people of color have to navigate every single day. And so when we talk about the equal opportunity and what are some of the barriers, we have to really dig into the inequity across the city. And if you think in Philadelphia, the experience that's being provided for our students is not determined by by who they are, but rather where they are born, where they live, what privileges, what ways in which parents and many years of experience allow the foundational principles of our society to put white folks at an advantage to navigate the system. And so when we think about the work that it takes to dismantle systemic racism, it can't only be based in personal reflection, but the actions we take in order to make a difference in changing the overall structures that negatively impact students in order for all students to overcome barriers.
Absolutely. I'm going to skip ahead for one question. Andrew, based on Anna's response, I feel like we really need to discuss like school segregation. Sometimes I think, it's really only gotten worse since that Brown versus Board of Education decision in 1954. So sometimes it's hard for maybe, some of our audience to really understand some of the challenges that our schools are going through right now. Why do you think, we tend to classify schools with euphemisms like suburban versus inner city. And we know that suburban means, well-funded schools typically made up of white students. And we know that inner city and urban are typically meant to describe underperforming, underfunded schools. I guess my question is, why do you think that our schools are so segregated? Why do we have two different systems where, some students can achieve and get that equalizing effect and then others cannot?
Well, I think it's systemic, right? So our schools are segregated because of just how housing and our housing, laws and things that have happened in the 50s and 60s with segregation and, inner cities and these tenements that were put up to house Black folks. We are still seeing the effects of that today in 2020 and 21. Some would argue whether or not segregated schools is actually the problem. Because you would, I know folks who are operating freedom schools and things of that nature that have Black and brown and indigenous people, and they strive. The issue becomes the schools are now segregated, and then now we operate in a certain mindset and a certain lens inside of these segregated schools. And so you think about urban, or you think about inner city, you think about high turnover rate with teachers, you think about poorly ventilated buildings and poor structure, you think about abject poverty and violence. Those things play a huge role in how schools, how we conduct school each day. When somebody is coming in that lives in abject poverty, they might be in a homeless shelter. They might be living in a place where you have several siblings and relatives in one home versus a child who's coming from suburbia, and they're driving to school every day. Mom and dad have resources, and resources are also a really huge thing when it comes to segregated schools. Where is the tax base for certain school systems when your biggest funding source is Title I money in a lot of these urban areas? You're not getting everything that kids need. Now, some can say, well, look at the amount of money that are spent in kids in the inner city and sometimes kids in the suburbs. And I would argue a lot of that money is to be placed in other areas, that money doesn't really go directly towards students or student achievement. So that's not the only story. There are a lot of urban schools operating in urban areas that are very successful. They have to do just a harder job. It's more to chip away and get through all the systems that kind of hold us to believing where our expectations could lie. And some folks have done a really good job. That they don't look at that. They find a third way and say, listen, we know the challenges, we know the barriers, but we're going to continue to push forward and raise the bar of what we expect. And it takes dedication, right? It takes I think a different type of mindset. Now, I think the most important person when you look at education inside of achievement is the classroom teacher. And so, I look at the classroom teacher, and then I move out, and then you start to look at those as I was a classroom teacher, and I know the effect that I had on a classroom teacher. Now as a superintendent, there's so many more layers underneath of me, and there's so many different structures and policies and procedures and practices that I have to fix in order to affect the kids that are in the classroom and the teachers that are teaching those kids in the classroom. So there is a big battle. I would say that there are some high achieving urban schools though. There's some really dedicated leaders. There's some dynamic leaders that are leading urban schools and urban environments. I would say that the work is probably a little bit more complicated, but it can be done.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to jumping into some of the things that you think lead to such successful schools. I know that you probably have implemented a lot in the Woodbury school system. I'm jumping back to Anna. Are there any other historical drivers that you feel we need to mention when talking about this type of inequity within the system before we jump into maybe on the classroom level or the school level?
Sure. Or I could talk all day about historical drivers that are impacting the experience. And I'd really be remiss, and I know you're taking us there, to not really talk about a difficult conversation. As Andrew just named, teachers do make the biggest impact in the experience of students. And we have a lot of teachers that need a lot of support. And to really be an excellent teacher is a craft that you have to continue to build on, that has evolved, and that requires instructional leadership, not only at the teacher level, but at the principal level. And in our city and across the board, there's many places and spaces where that is a huge gap in the experience that we're able to provide students because of the lack of focus on instruction at the rigor and bar that it needs to be, coupled with the social emotional support in order to give our students the experience that will really put them on the same plane to overcome so many of the systemic barriers that are in place.
Absolutely. So I'm seeing that some of our audience is already asking some questions. We are going to get into some, curriculum, some particular, like on a school level, about what we can do in order to combat this racism. I am wondering, sorry, I lost place of my questions. I guess, Andrew, as a school leader, is there anything that you are faced with on, a day-to-day basis that you feel would really speak to these challenges? And that maybe I'm a teacher, I'm not fully aware of some of the, day-to-day challenges that a school leader faces, and that could really provide us with some big picture questions before moving into, teachers and classrooms.
So, yeah, that's a great question. So as a superintendent, I think the biggest challenge that I've faced or am facing daily and actually it's kind of simple, because it's simple doesn't mean it's easy. It's actually getting every layer, every level of the organization rowing in the same direction, going in the same direction with the same frame of mind. So for instance, I'm in Woodbury, and Woodbury, New Jersey. It's a little bit different from where I worked in Camden for 22 years. Woodbury is a very diverse district. So it's a district of the haves and the have-nots. And so when you have 70% of your students identifying as Black or Latinx or other, or mixed students of color, over 70%, and you have over 98% of your staff when I first got there being white teachers. And in some of our suburban districts, there is not a high turnover rate. So we're talking about a district who has seen the demographics of the district shift to more students of color over the last 10 to 20 years with the same folks who've been teaching there for 10 to 20 years. And so trying to understand, what's the difference now between what I was doing 10, 20 years ago to what I should be doing now. And then also just looking at our policies and how we attack every aspect of our district, whether it's school choice. How do we allow students who don't live in our district to come join us? How do we retain students? How do I address white flight in our district when it gets to the high school? How do I address our discipline policy? What do we do with the funding that we get? How do we prioritize projects? Do we spend money on the gymnasium, or do we try to build a comprehensive CTE program right now for our students? And so those are some of the biggest challenges, is trying to get everybody rowing in the same direction. And a huge challenge that I've had this year, and it is around racism, is, and I'm going to be transparent in saying it, it's very difficult to talk about systemic racism, inequity, advocacy for Black and brown children when you have some school leaders who say, that's not my job. And that was one of the most alarming things that has just been presented to me this year. I've never really worked in an area where somebody said, my job is not to talk about politics or race or what's happening in the world. My job is just to strictly educate. And so that narrative really, threw me for a loop, that I have educators that I have to work with every day who philosophically don't have the same philosophy that I have around Black and brown children and advocacy. And so that's been a huge challenge.
Wow, yeah, I can imagine just, that first step of even having that conversation and not being able to do so is definitely a hindrance. I love that you mentioned hiring and a diverse workforce. I feel like that's something that is definitely something that we need to bring up in this conversation. I guess for both of you, what is the importance of having teachers of color in all schools, regardless of what students they serve? Why is it important to get teachers of color? And then what are some strategies, or I guess, strategies to retain those teachers of color in school buildings?
Anna, I'll let you begin.
Thank you, Andrew. First and foremost, I think segueing off of what Andrew was talking about, the unconscious bias of white teachers and leaders is something that we really need to address more upfront in our systems, because the ways in which teachers show up, white teachers in particular, can show up to work with students, you do have to consider the ways in which you need to understand situations, you need to learn from situations, and you need to constantly be reflecting on your own practice to best support students. When we think about the benefits of having a diverse teacher workforce, all of the data shows that actually all students, regardless of race, do better when they are served by a teacher of color. And that's very problematic in the state of Pennsylvania, when there are 92% of our teachers in the state of Pennsylvania are white. We actually have the whitest teaching force in the entire country. So when we think about what strategies really need to be in place, I think it goes a long way to think about not only how are we recruiting teachers of color, but what are the systems and conditions in place within a school to have folks truly have voices and perspectives heard, responded to, listened to, and work in partnership to not only diversify the teaching force, but also really work towards equity, inclusion, and involvement of all to enhance the experience and have the desired effect of having our educators in place. Andrew, I know you want to add on here.
Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, there's so many huge factors on why teachers of color are so important. And I think for many of our kids, when you think about teachers, there's like a idea of like reverence, like for a teacher. Like your teacher is one of those people that you remember for a lifetime. But one thing about, I remember when I was a kid, all my teachers were white. I never had a teacher of color. And, but I also knew that I could have a white teacher, and that the lawyer was white, the doctor was probably white, the person who owned the business was probably white. And so we kind of got this ideology that, not only were white people teachers, but they were everything else that we look to be in society. And sometimes when you look at, Black folks teaching, you don't see a lot of us in the teaching field. And then when I think about like, well, who would I want to be, or what do I envision somebody of success, Black, what do they do? And most of the time we're talking about either an athlete or an entertainer. And so we don't automatically think. Now we have some folks, of course, who are doctors and lawyers, but that's not the overarching kind of idea we have of Black people in our society. And so for me, I think, now I didn't know any of this when I was a young teacher in Camden or Baltimore. I was just a young guy who loved working with kids and loved being in the gym and spending time with the young guys and being, a role model. But now that I look back on it, I know how important it was for me to play that role, because I was something that maybe they weren't seeing. I was different. I wasn't a rapper. I wasn't an entertainer, but I had just as much influence. And so that's what I think about when I see and I study over the years teachers of color, males or females, especially Black males in education, the impact that they have in classrooms, the impact that they have on kids. And because there is a missing factor there of Black males in our society. And a lot of kids are kind of missing that traditional father figure, or some of them have them, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to paint this picture that there's no Black men around, but there are some missing in action. And so for me as a educator, I was able to really build some strong relationships with kids just because I cared about them. And I wanted them to do well. I wanted them to succeed. And, if they could watch me, maybe they could, get an idea of decision making. And so it became important to me to kind of really be a positive role model. Now, as a superintendent, you talk about unintentional consequences of like not being able to have a diverse work field. So let me just give you a quick scenario. If you work in a suburban school district and you are looking to diversify your workforce, what happens is, though, there's not a lot of teacher turnover. So the average teacher has been there 20, 25 years. So maybe in any given year, maybe 2 or 3 teaching positions will become available. What happens is the principal knows somebody whose daughter's graduating. The lady next door knows somebody who has a sister, or it's generational. I'm a 4th generation teacher, and sometimes you get quick access to those jobs, and I think that's an unintentional consequence of how our teaching systems don't look diverse, is because we don't have to bother to go outside of our circle to diversify the teaching, the workforce, because we know somebody who's waiting to fill. And most of the time we know somebody because we know somebody who looks like us. And so what we've tried to do in Woodbury, I've been there since July of 19, we had 3 certified male teachers in the entire district. And none of them taught a content area like math or science. We had 1 health and PE teacher, we had a vice principal, and we had another gentleman who kind of taught an elective. And so our role was to, when we got vacancies, not just to say, oh, we already have 20 resumes, is to open it up, do the legwork, interview everybody that we can. I'm proud to say, like, in less than 2 years, we have hired almost 15 teachers of color that are certified, working in classrooms, and not the typical jobs that we see getting offered to teachers of color or people of color. Not the assistant, nothing wrong with being a teacher assistant, but there are certified people that can teach in the classroom. They need opportunity, and they need to know that if they come into an environment where they're not the majority, they're still going to be treated well as a teacher. And so that's another layer of trying to diversify a workforce that's really not that diverse at all. We can get Black and brown and Latinx teachers to go in urban environments because that's where we are. But to try to get some folks to go in other environments where 95% of the teaching force is white is another layer, because they don't feel comfortable there. There's not a lot of camaraderie there. There's not a lot of familiarity there. And so it's been a real challenge. But the importance of Black and brown teachers is so monumental, and we need systemic programs. We need programs that address kids in high school, that address men of color in college, especially those who like to deal in athletics, coaches. We need to make sure education, and it's not, people think, well, I'm an educator, I'm going to be, I'm not going to make a lot of money. I'm going to be struggling, and that's just not the case. So I think it's very important to have teachers of color, and we're trying to always figure it out. I don't think we can have job fairs and we could do other things, but we need an actual system that addresses, and we have so many barriers, praxis and testing and those things. And if you have a 2.5 in undergrad, you may not be able to get into an alternative route program, which is a block, is a hindrance to getting teachers of color. We have to change all of that. I worked with some folks in New Jersey, Senator Ruiz, on legislation to change some of those things so we can get alternative route programs, so we can have partnering programs to get teachers of color in, folks who are looking at second careers. That, there's a lot of barriers getting folks into education that are non-traditional educators.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love a few points that you had pointed out. I mean, number one, I think I read recently that like 2% of the teaching workforce were Black males, 2%. And then if you have a Black teacher by 3rd grade, your student of color is 32% more likely to graduate. So I just, the importance of that, it would definitely be a great starting point, to think about hiring and then retaining, making sure that those maybe white spaces that were previously made up of, white people are made, accessible, and that space is feeling more comfortable for them. So thank you for bringing up that idea of hiring teachers of color. I had a question from Hank Weaver in the audience, and I wanted to bring it up because another area besides hiring practices is changing the curriculum itself in education. So Hank says, great dialogue about lack of access and equality relative to education. What about the curriculum itself and the bias it has on a particular narrative? What effect do you think this has on children who don't see themselves reflected in terms of self-esteem and confidence? Great question. Thank you for that, Hank.
It has a huge impact. It really does. It has a huge impact. Culturally competent instruction and curriculum is paramount. Now, how you chip away at that system of, looking at even just history. We in Woodbury just created a course. And of course, we have to come in at the slow level, which is, okay, it's going to be an elective. But we got to start thinking, and this including myself, it shouldn't be an elective. It has to be a graduation requirement. When you talk about the sciences and the things that are being when you walk into a chemistry room or physics, are we celebrating folks of color who have paved the way in physics or in the sciences or in history or in literary terms? But if the teacher who's teaching it is not exposed to that, we are going to continue to struggle with access to really relevant curriculum for our students. I think our students come to life, and the aspect of learning comes to life when you can see yourself in instruction. And for a lot of our young people, they do not see themselves in instruction. And if they do see themselves in instruction, it's of course, we got 2 more days. It's this month, and it always starts with slavery. And so, I was a victim of that. I didn't see myself in the diaspora of Black people from Egypt and Africa until I was 19 years old. And so if we are not creating those systems, and it's an uncomfortable conversation for a lot of teachers who are not teachers of color, to say, I think intentionally or unintentionally, you are teaching not to the best interests of Black and brown children. That's a very difficult conversation. There's a lot of fragility there. And you'll be accused of a lot of things, of race baiting and doing those other things. But in other environments where it's more welcome, you have to put your resources, you have to put your, when you talk about budget planning and these things, it's a huge shift. You have to you kind of have to do it. And a lot of times we get stuck on, well, here's another change, and are the teachers going to, how we're going to train teachers and the development and what's it going to cost. And we let that hinder us from really making monumental shifts in curriculum and how we see curriculum. And then, we can get into, and I know we're not there yet, but you talk about curriculum and you have to tie that to standardized informative assessments and testing. And the biases around those practices. And even though many of us will say, well, formative assessment is just one view of the kid. We say that because it sounds good, but when the rubber meets the road, we really look and we go to a formative assessment and say, here, the kid is not reading on grade level, they're not achieving. And so what we say one thing because it sounds good is lip service, but we really don't believe it. We do believe in formative assessment. And so we get away from curriculum because we are starting to be about assessing. And so we have to strike a balance somewhere.
Absolutely. And Anna, are there any shifts in recruiting, I guess, the Teach for America classes, those young teachers that are coming in that, I don't know, maybe, addressing those biases that we've talked about, preparing them with curriculum? Do you see any spots that really could be changed in the preparation of teachers? I know that you work very closely with Teach for America, and a lot of those students are, they're new in the classroom. So I guess I'm wondering what kind of things that you think of with curriculum.
Yeah, absolutely. So first and foremost, Teach for America, we have made a lot of intentional shifts in order to recruit a more diverse core and a more diverse teaching force. Over 50% of our core members identify as people of color. And what that means is how we are able to then train and show up for our students. The responsibility is on us to train our educators with a commitment to anti-racism. And to Andrew's point, that's deeply interrogating our ways of teacher practice and really thinking about how are the materials we're using supporting that, not supporting that, and every day thinking about what we are doing in order to best prepare our teachers. What that looks like in practice is a few different things. If there was a secret approach, I'd be happy to share it. But honestly, when you think about the curriculum, it's across the board. So many, all of us have been inundated with a curriculum that's steeped in European context and culture and rooted in white ideology. And similarly, our white students are not also exposed to a varying perspective. And so then this translates to our white teachers who are unaware of the ways in which they're continuing damaging and harmful, not telling the true story of history in the past. And so at Teach for America this past summer, we pivoted with COVID, obviously, but to taking the opportunity to revamp a lot of our training to culturally responsive pedagogy and competent curriculums, and then working with providers to source all the materials and look through deeper beyond just what we are teaching, what are the materials we're using and how are we doing that. But that's an ongoing conversation and equipping individual new teachers with the skills and courage to also have that conversation and navigate those systems in their schools.
Yeah, I recognize just how, obviously we have a far way to go. Another question that I think we might not have the answer to fully, Fanal Norton said, Andrew and Anna, this is a great discussion. When we are addressing systemic racism and bias, how can a teacher not willing to participate be part of that process? I know that's a struggle that you're dealing with, almost right now in real time, but.
I mean, for me, honestly, I don't let up, right? And so I have those conversations because it's my role as superintendent to let you know exactly the direction that we're going to move in, what I believe in, and what I believe is important. And I also bring concrete evidence of why, I take my emotions out of it, try not to rant and rave. And, you use really concrete examples of why this is important to do it now and why we're addressing it now. And, whenever I'm kind of a different person, a leader, I have the privilege of being superintendent. My office is actually right in the high school, in the junior, senior high, right in the middle. So I can simply come out of my office and I can be in any classroom in less than 30 seconds. I can be in the principal's office in less than 30 seconds. And so sometimes when I get a thought in my head, I'll just jump up and go right into his office and say, I need to speak to you for a minute. And we can go over these examples. And I think when you continue just to chip away and you present it in a professional manner and you present the evidence and you communicate, we have a group of core values that we try to abide by. And so I try to communicate with the effect of, I'm going to give you some information for you to think about and be reflective about, and we can talk about it later. And I'm okay with whether you don't accept it in the moment or there's some non-closure in that moment. But I just want to be very clear about how I feel, and as the leader, what I believe the direction of the district is going to go. We're going to go in this direction whether you're on board or not. And so what's going to happen is we're going to continue to push and push and push, and it's going to become very clear either now or later that you are the albatross. So now you have to make a decision on whether or not I believe in the philosophy that's moving forward, where the rubber meets the road, or you're going to have to make some really critical decisions, or I have to make some critical decisions on how we move forward. But I think that there is, when you have teachers who come in my office, I can think of one particular teacher who has been in my office. She actually was in my office today, who told me about her background, growing up with two racist parents, knowing that she was a racist in her first few years of teaching, and then coming to where she is now, and that overwhelming guilt of racism eats at her every day when she teaches Black and brown children, because she knows what she used to believe is not, it was garbage, what she was believing in. She has still admits that she has a long way to go to understanding how I can be a better teacher in addressing my students of color. But to me, she's probably the most important person, is because she's willing to have that discussion, and she's reflective enough to know that I need more. I have to do more. I'm not where I should be. And I think that's where I can see a little bit of the glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. The teacher who is completely recalcitrant and says, this doesn't belong in education, I don't need it. Yes, we have them, but we got to keep chipping away. We got to keep chipping away.
And I think you offer some pretty good advice, just talking about the history, like adding a historical context to it, providing that reflective time for them. So thank you for sharing those pieces of advice. And I think it'll also depend on the white allies in the school too. I don't know if Anna, did you want to continue on with that question? I didn't
Sure,
know.
I can. Yeah, sure, Maura. I think the thing I would just underscore from what Andrew said is, as leaders, as teachers, having the courage to say something when you bear witness to a microaggression, to someone saying something about our students, to someone talking or doing things that you know are not appropriate. And it is, don't get me wrong, the easy thing is to not say something. What is necessary is for us all to say something, and especially white folks that are in our schools. It is not a choice to address race and equity. That is part of your job. And the way that I see it is, if you are not willing, then you are in the wrong place. And my role as a leader and as a colleague, as a bystander, is to have that conversation with you and be willing to have the courage, and also be willing to listen when colleagues of color or other folks give you feedback. I remember an incident actually with Andrew, that we were doing a professional development. You remember this, Drew, with the book in the library, I bet, that I was about to hand Grip by Angela Duckworth to all of the principals we were training. And Drew said, we can't do that right now. I have some concerns about that. Instead of me questioning, even in that moment, but why, Drew? But what about this? What about this? I need to trust that his perspective in naming that there is something concerning from his perspective as a Black male, and how we are going to share that information with leaders is valuable, right? And not get into the structures and components of white dominant culture that would lead me to question and want to live into me being right about something. And so another piece of feedback when we're really talking about teachers that aren't willing to address it is, you got to say the thing, and you got to be willing to have that conversation. And it doesn't mean you have to be confrontational or mean or nasty. It means you got to find a way to call people into the conversation. And if you don't, you're doing a disservice to your students.
Absolutely. Thank you, Anna. And that example is definitely very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. I guess maybe we're moving into our final question. There is some pretty good conversation in the chat, the last Patricia Scott's. I loved hearing that, how you came to that realization with this conversation. So thank you, Patricia, for sharing that. I also see, real quick, if we could talk about maybe like school choice and charter schools. I don't know who wants to take this on, but it says, it's from Matthew Scott. Hi, Anna and Andrew. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're hearing a lot in our politics today about charter schools, school choice versus traditional public schools. What are your takes on this, the charter school, school choice? Are these options better for minority students? I'm a skeptic. Thank you.
So Anna and I we'll probably fight over who can answer this one the best here. So I think good schools are good schools, right? Public, charter, Renaissance. I see one of my favorite principals here, Natalie Cooper, and who works for Uncommon Schools, and we've done some work together in Camden. I am a public school person. I've been in public school forever, and I personally believe, I love competition, right? When I was a principal, and I was a principal in Camden, and the charter schools were just coming in, and I remember telling my boss, man, listen, you can put a charter school right across the street, and we can go at it. I'm gonna have just as many kids, and we're gonna have a great place here, because I believe I can create that environment, and I believe in that. But I also believe in choice, right? I can't, I honestly believe that, should our charter and charter schools be held to a certain standard? Yes, like somebody has to go in and say, this practice that you're doing is not acceptable. This thing that you're doing in the community is not acceptable. This thing that you're doing in the community is great. This thing that you're doing for the kids is great. The same kind of parameters that we're putting on public school, right? And there's a lot of different nuances about public and charter that I don't think we have really time to uncover. But what I will say is, I learned a lot working in organizations that were kind of labeled as charter organizations. I think I really learned a lot when I went to Relay Principal Fellowship, the first one in 2014. And people thought, when I came back to my public school, some people thought I had drank the Kool-Aid. But I took the practices that I could learn from other educators and tried to fit it into a public school. What can I do in my school to make my school better? And so I would just say to folks that there are a lot of bad public schools out there run by people who are running into the ground. There are a lot of really good public schools run by really good principals. There are a lot of bad charter organizations. There are a lot of really good charter organizations. There is issues in some of our charter organizations that come into urban areas that I think they could work on. They could work on really being sensitive to the community. They can work on diversifying and how they look at Black and brown people in the organization and where they fall in the organization. I remember doing one school walk in a school in Philadelphia, and I was really kind of disappointed that there was no teachers of color teaching any content in the classrooms. All of the people that worked in the building of color were doing discipline and doing the gym and working in the cafeteria and greeting me at the door. And, systematically, I believe that's a problem. But a lot of our organizations were framed that way. And I understand, why they would do that. But there's a lot of other root causes of why that happens. So finding teachers of color inside the classrooms and charter organizations are important. Being culturally responsive to the community that you're in, and everything is not based on formative assessments is a huge thing. But, we get caught into that. We say the school is successful. We need a measure. So the measure could be a formative assessment, but there are other measures to measure success in schools. And so I'm one of those folks who I'm traditionally a public school person. I probably will stay in public school until I retire. I've been in 25 years, but I'm also not a person who's going to say, I don't believe that a parent has a right to send their child to a charter organization that they think is doing a very good job of educating their children, or a Renaissance school or a private school of that. That's a parental choice. I do want, that's why I partner and talk to a lot of our Renaissance folks. Listen, I've been in Natalie Cooper School two or three times, sitting in classrooms, asking questions. I'm trying to find out what are they doing instructionally that we could bring back to public schools to help us and to help our teachers. We have professional development together, and those things are unprecedented. If we're all really about helping kids, sometimes the school context or framing doesn't matter if we're really about moving the needle for children. But I can talk about that for another 2 hours. I will let Anna talk.
It's okay. The only thing I would add is I'd be remiss if in this conversation, if I didn't underscore the ways in which charters have impacted students and impacted the system in negative ways. And so the level of competition across the system as a result of the expansion of charters, as a result of other factors, does lead students to get lost in between. So as more schools come up and there's more choice, that means that there are unintended consequences of that. And so I think that as we, especially now in COVID, head into this next school year, our third school year in a pandemic, that the biggest miss will be if we are not more innovative and truly acknowledge the ways in which our lowest performing schools and most under-resourced schools are going to be impacted more than any other schools. And even as of the response, we're seeing how charters are able, because of their financial resources and the flexibility and structures, are able to show up in different ways that the traditional schools are not. And so I don't have a solution for that, but want to put it on the table to keep top of mind as we all continue to navigate this time and space.
And just real quick, I had a question from Marissa DiCandido. She said, are there actions that we can take as taxpayers to communicate our concerns to our local districts if we're talking about different school choices? I like this point because a lot of us on the call, maybe our role in this is, simply taxpayers. Do you, Andrew, maybe of some policy or, school district level, practices that, taxpayers could try to move a little bit and communicate their concerns to local districts in an effective way?
Yeah, I mean, you got to show up, right? You show up at board meetings and you talk to the board and you communicate your concerns about the practices that are happening in your school district or in any school district, really. And I think those community voices are very important. When I think about even where I'm at and where I'm leading now, trying to encourage even our parents and community members of color to come and be more prominent in board meetings and town halls and to voice, their opinions on what they think about the curriculum or, what a teacher is doing or what the superintendent is doing, to show up. And then as far as tax base are concerned, the taxpayers, we serve in the public school and even charter schools, we are serving that tax base. And so I would like to encourage conversation and dialogue at all levels, encourage folks to, ask those questions, those difficult questions. What are we doing to attack racism and some of those policies? Unfortunately, many times we get stuck with just the challenges. And I know for me, the last couple of years, I kind of keep hearing the underlining those buzzwords that let me know that we have a racial problem. You hear demographics and you hear climate and culture and you hear things like it's not what it used to be and it's changing. And knowing the history of where I'm working at now leads me to believe that we need all of the voices at the table because, some of our folks are happy. African Americans are saying we have an African American superintendent and we see the changes, but they don't show up at board meetings and make that known. I have the same 4 or 5 parents at the board meeting saying the climate is bad, and saying that the kids are, you hear the buzzwords, kids are out of control. We need to put kids out of buildings. They need to be moved to other areas. We need to be checking addresses and residency, make sure folks actually live here. So I hear a lot of that, and I know what that means. And so we have a lot of work to do. But yes, we still need those voices. We need those voices of people to come out and that want action in a more positive way to see inequities kind of dissipate. I will say that in our organization over the last 2 years, we have formed a committee called the REACT Committee. It's our Race and Equity Accountability Committee, Race and Equity Advisory Committee. And we have been able to do some really good work, but we had to spend a lot of time on understanding racism, how structurally we are promoting some policies and some practices that are not really good. And so we've spent almost a year in just our leadership team understanding that we are not going to do this at a surface level. We are going to dig deep, but we got to get everybody on the same page. And so we've been doing a lot of work around race and equity. So I think there is a path moving forward.
Well, thank you so much. I know I'm going to leave here with a few, notes that I've been scribbling down, and I really appreciate your insight and, just all of the insight that you've brought to us tonight. So I'm going to hand it over to April, but thank you, Anna. Thank you, Andrew, so much for all of your answers.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I was actually in the middle of typing a question for Andrew. So now I get to ask it before I wrap up. So I just wanted to ask the question for the audience, Andrew. Do you think that teachers and principals really understand the root issues and causes of racism in the educational system and how that affects children of color? Do they, because when they say this is not my job, then I don't think that they clearly understand the cause and effects, the onion of racism and how it affects the children and how they learn and what they, so that's my question. Do they understand that?
That's a great question. No, without a doubt, no. And I can just say from my experience. So, no, they don't understand. And in my personal experience, I've had a couple who are willing to listen and try to understand, and I've had others who really are not particularly interested in trying to understand. I mean, it happened today, April. I told them that and excuse my layman's terms here. I say, listen, we got to lay off of Dr. Seuss. You guys know about Dr. Seuss? And she said, absolutely. Like, no, like what is going, like, I've never heard of that. And so I spent 2 hours talking about why we have to show evidence to our community and our teachers, why, Dr. Seuss is not somebody we should probably always be celebrating in our elementary schools. And the person, it almost was, I never, let me research. I never knew, as if I had made that story up. And, I'm glad I have a plethora of evidence and links and say, no, listen, this is something that is you just don't know about it, or you're just oblivious, but this is the kind of stuff that's happening. We talk about policing and why, I thought when I first got to my district, and I was really saying, why do we have armed officers in elementary schools? Like our community, that's like a really, we may not want to, that's not something I want to see. We can use that resource to do something else. So, and they just couldn't understand, well, what's the problem? And so I would say no. And I would really say this. It's not just white principals. We have some Black principals who don't understand either, who and sometimes are even unwilling to be looked at as somebody who talks about race. So they play it very cool and play it very even to kind of get buy-in and be welcomed and accepted. And so my unequivocal answer is no. Because some of the things that happen, you just don't see, you would think that somebody would be really angry about some of the things that are happening, and you kind of see things just kind of being, pushed under the rug. So no. And it is, we have, I see some folks in the room, we have principals here, and I know we have principals here who know the work. But it's something that we continually have to do. And my job as a superintendent, and I know my role, is to not shy away from crucial and critical conversations. I think I'm averaging maybe 2 to 3 real critical conversations every day in my district now. More so when I was working in Camden, now where I'm working, really critical conversations.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, I just, thank you, Andrew and Anna, for this very rich and wonderful conversation, very needed. When you guys were talking, I just kept getting flashbacks of my schooling, flashbacks of elementary school, flashbacks of junior high school, and just every single thing you guys were saying is absolutely true. We were bused into a white area for school from a poor neighborhood. We were bused in. The only Black teacher I saw was my gym teacher, and my self-esteem and my who I thought I was directly a result of what I saw and what I didn't see. I did not like myself. I didn't see myself. I didn't like myself. And it was just bringing back flashbacks. So it is definitely important to have teachers of color in schools. It plays a huge role. You guys were talking about charter schools, and I don't really understand the necessity for charter schools. I really don't, but I do know this. There's no charter schools where I live. There's no charter schools in the suburbs where the white kids are. So if it's so good for everybody, then why aren't they here in the suburbs? Why is the charter school good for the inner city kids and not for the suburban kids? So that's how I kind of determine what I think is good or bad. And so, but I don't want to re-preach the message, because you guys did a wonderful job, and I want to thank you so much for sharing your experiences and sharing your stories with us. It's definitely a conversation that we need to continue to have with our communities. And I just really appreciate you guys taking the time to speak with us in our Common Bonds community. Please stay connected with us. We definitely need you guys, and we are available to you guys if you need us. So thank you again. Maura, you did an excellent job. Thank you for facilitating the conversation. You had some really wonderful questions. I think you did an awesome job. So thank you so much. So what I want to do is just kind of remind you guys that next month our topic will be racism and criminal justice. And that's another subject that is dear to me. And that's a subject that's hard, but that is a conversation that we also need to have. So stay tuned, guys. Check your communications for invitations to our criminal justice speaker series. We're also going to have a special speaker series next month. We will have NFL running back Josh Adams speaking to us on March 2nd. March 2nd, Josh Adams will talk to us about his journey to the NFL. He'll talk to us about his upbringing, his challenges that he's had making it to the NFL. And then he's working on a park revitalization project where he wants to give back to the poor and moderate children in the area. So he wants to create an environment for them that they can play outside and that they'll have what they need to feel good about their surroundings. So we're going to talk to Josh Adams on March 2nd. So guys, stay tuned for that. We're going to send out, I think it's already going out today. So sign up for that speaker series if you could. It's at 6:00 on March 2nd. So we look forward to having that conversation with Josh Adams. And so if all hearts and minds are clear, we want to thank everyone, our Common Bonds community, for your faithful support of us. Thank you so much. We can't do this without you guys. It takes all of us. It takes all of us. It takes Black people and white people, and just having these conversations about racism and about what we can do to make a more to create a more perfect union. So thank you everybody for joining us tonight. We look forward to seeing you guys in the future, and everybody please stay safe and have a wonderful night. We'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Have a good night.
Get out of here.